When are they going to start building?
We're currently working on that with community development, so I don't have an estimated date yet of when that's going to be approved. But I know it's soon because they all bug us.
Good, because we're losing a lot of sales tax revenue to Menifee because of it.
Oh, there's a Raising Cane's out there? And then the last one, Rallies. I know we've worked a lot with them on the layout of their parking lot because we've had some concerns about it, but that one's coming as well. So as the city manager mentioned, I didn't get into all the projects. The EVP, the Emergency Vehicle Preemption, it's been a long time coming because we've been working with Caltrans. They actually were installing a lot of the equipment, but we had to have our contractor then set everything up. Kind of weird, but they're still working on that, getting out the kinks. It has been working, but we just haven't made a grand fanfare for that yet. I've had both chiefs out in the field with us, making sure that things were going forward. We even had the PD come back and test every single one of the intersections.
Hi, Jeff.
So just so you know as well, before we get into the questions, we also do, as I mentioned before with the community development, we attend the DRC as it comes up. There's a lot of those projects that you saw there. It just takes the time to get through. The developers are oftentimes very antsy. Time is money. We try to just get through as best we can. You get calls once in a while, unfortunately, but we just keep pushing forward. We're going to keep continuing forward with the CIP. We've still got several $1 million coming up to finish off this year, as well as the next fiscal year, because of the funding sources that we get. Continuing with CDBG projects, we are working on making an application for the HSIP grant, the Cycle 10, and what we're working on there is, you may have seen them around town, the traffic signals that have the yellow strip on the back plate. So that's manual of uniform traffic control devices. That's kind of what governs all the traffic stuff that we do. That's an option to put on these traffic signals. It enhances the visibility. The one cool thing about that is that it's through HSIP's eyes, they look at it as a completely offsetting cost or offsetting safety measure, which means they completely fund those, as long as we can get accepted by the grant. You perked up because I don't try to go after grants I'm going to have to spend money on because it's small enough as it is. So my vision has always been kind of just go after the stuff that we can get and we can do, because these things we can do. As long as we get approved, which we shouldn't have a problem because it's safety enhancements. We don't have to show a benefit cost. It's just this is a set aside by the government. It's a safety enhancement. So we're looking at doing it. That's actually due next week. So it's one of those things we picked up with the city manager's authorization a couple weeks ago. So go for it. So I'm excited about those things. Hemet Valley Bikeway is another project that was a grant opportunity. We've done some modifications on that to kind of shift things around, but that's moving forward. We're getting the design worked on that. We've got an extension working through Caltrans. It's going to be on the December CTC, the California Transportation Commission Board, to hear the extension of time, which it should go through without a problem, but that project's coming forward as well. So with that, I'm here for any questions. I mean, I can talk about all the different projects all night, but
I have.
Thank you very much, Steve. So, Linda, go ahead with your question.
When it comes to the ADA ramps, they used to all be blue. Why did they change to yellow and we had to replace all of them?
When the regulations first came out, it was kind of loosey-goosey on the colors you can put out there. And I do remember there was a statement that was made when I first started here that somebody had come through and wanted to put blue on all of them. I think maybe it was an opinion or council reaction, or whatever it was. I don't remember. But all those were put in, and the standardized way of doing it is the yellow now. But we're not replacing those because they're blue. If we have to replace them, It's because they're non-compliant, not just because they're blue.
That question comes up a lot. I like blue. Why are you putting yellow in there? It's like, oh.
Well,
But
I think
there's a compliance, with the construction, with the little bumpy things?
Oh, yeah, so the new compliance that the flavor of the month that we're working on is that if you notice back on one of the slides, there is supposed to be a 0-inch curb face between the gutter and the flow line now. Whereas before, that wasn't really an issue. But that regulation changed. If you notice some of the blue ones, even some of the older yellow ones, they actually are sloped, whereas you're supposed to have a flat spot, a flat landing at the bottom. So, but Councilmember Percival, you mentioned that there's some odd things now anyway. So I said the flavor of the month.
But since you did talk about traffic lights, what is, if it's a safety thing, is there any possibility to look at some of these left turn lights where because there's a few of them in the city where there's a left turn green and a yellow arrow, and then once the green and yellow, the yellow goes away, it goes to a green yield, left turn yield. Are there any possibility of maybe going to some of those at some additional intersections?
There's two options there, because I do understand what you're saying is about the green ball, right? So when it's
Those are the protected permissive
correct.
signals.
So one option that we've gone to in the past in many agencies is basically the left turn arrow, basically protected left turn. You may have seen also in some locations they're starting to do the flashing yellow arrow, where that's basically another protected permissive type situation. And we put a sign up on the mast arm, and the yellow arrow flashes. It's basically yield with the yellow arrow flashing. It's one of the other items within the MUTCD that is for enhancing of safety. But is there a particular intersection that you are concerned with more, or is it just in general about having...
In general.
Okay.
I mean, I could give you a list of specific left turns, but in general.
Because if you notice, when Caltrans put their project through on Florida, they put a lot of the signals to protected, because they were just basically protected permissive before, but with just the green, yellow, and red. So now they've added the left turn facing as well. But they could have gone one step further and had the flashing yellow arrow, but I don't think Caltrans has adopted that yet. They're kind of behind. So.
You can say that again. Louder.
Harlan?
I'm working with them very well on projects they have come through.
Well, I appreciate the update on this, and
My pleasure.
I know that there's an awful lot of nitty-gritty details that you're sparing us from.
A lot of engineer talk.
But we know it has to happen, and we're just happy to see that there's progress being made, and a lot of the comments that we hear from our constituents is, why aren't they doing something with this road or with that road or with this pothole or that? So we can't do it all at once. We can't afford to do it all at once, but it's nice to have a positive report that we're making progress and picking up and catching up on some past due projects. So thank you for that overview.
And if I could just leave you one fast comment, it's kind of funny, the fact that you say, great, the streets are getting done. Well, the problems that I get then are the calls saying, the people are speeding on my street now that you fixed it. So.
A couple concluding items that I think are relevant for the council to know. We've been having conversations collectively across all of the departments about the future CIP projects that we need to accomplish that maybe were not envisioned a few years ago when the 2017 CIP had been adopted. So we're working on updating that document, but it's a very comprehensive document, and we're working with the rest of our team. We're also being realistic about not shoving 50 projects into something, knowing that we have capacity limits, and so we want to be realistic about what we're going to set out to accomplish and actually achieve that. When the 2017 CIP was adopted, you see that we're finally getting to those after some time. So we want to be realistic about what we're going to accomplish. There's one particular item that's really relevant, and that's the water utility. That's a really important asset that we have in our community, but we need to reinvest some resources into making sure that the system is operating in a manner that is reliable and that can continue on for many years in the future. So those are the types of conversations that we're having, and it's very good that we have the coordination between engineering and public works to make that happen. And then the final thing I would like to add is that the Infrastructure Commission met for the first time not too long ago. So we want to be mindful about providing them the relevant information that we have, and I'll be sending this over to the group later on today or tomorrow so that they have that. But we also know that they will be in the near term reviewing some of the items that have been worked on or the staff has been working on for some time. So they will be having some more items come their way in the near future, and I know that they're excited about the opportunities to be involved in some of these conversations and really be a part of that. So we're also looking forward to that as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate those updates always. Moving on to item 12, receive and file. We have 12A, the investment portfolio as of August of 2020. Typically, that is receive and file motion, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to receive and file.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, that passes unanimously. Item 13 is consent calendar. These items will be acted upon simultaneously unless requested by an individual council member for separate consideration. Are there any members of council who would like to pull an item off of the consent calendar for separate consideration?
13D, please.
13B, D. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on items 13A, B, and C.
Move to approve A, B, and C.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve items 13A, B, and C. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer? Yes. Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes, that passes unanimously.
Can I just make a comment on one of those items?
Yes.
13B. Good work, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, item 13D.
So I would like to first off start off by introducing our new interim Public Works Director, Lynn Merrill. He is starting with us. He started with us yesterday. As many of you know, Tim Holtz did relocate to a different state, and so he has moved away. Lynn comes to us with a vast knowledge base, experience in numerous agencies, and collective involvement throughout the Southern California region. So we're really happy to have Lynn on board, and we're really excited to continue on the good work that's been going on in public works in tandem with engineering. So Lynn, if you could take a moment to just briefly talk about your background, I think that would be beneficial for the council as well as the community too.
Absolutely. As Chris said, my name is Lynn Merrill. My background includes, and don't hold this against me, 6 years with the city of San Bernardino where I was a public services director, which was in essence the field activities of public works. So I was responsible for refuse operations, street maintenance, sewer collection, environmental fleet operations. For the last 16 years, I have been providing consulting services to a variety of clients throughout Southern California, as the city manager noted. My activities have included doing CIP work for various cities in terms of developing specifications. I was the interim public works director for the city of San Jacinto under Mr. Holtz and I've served as interim in the city of Paris, parks as well as public services superintendent. I've been the public works superintendent in the city of Rialto on an interim basis. So I've done quite a bit of a variety of things. At San Jacinto, I assisted on the water master, Hemet San Jacinto water master, where I got to know Mayor Pro Tem Krupa, as well as some of the other staff that's involved. And so I'm very excited to be your interim. I've already captured the lady that had the complaint, and we will be addressing that tomorrow. I'll get a hold of her and deal with that. But I am very excited. I'm looking forward to working with your city engineer on moving your CIP forward. And great staff you have at Public Works. In the 2 days I've been down there, I've been able to evaluate what they're doing. This morning I had an introduction to Cartograph and was very impressed with the detail and level of information on the asset works, the asset management programs that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to doing some enhancements and of course working with your city manager. So with that, as I said, don't hold it against me. I came from San Bernardino. Chris and I do share a common bond in that he came in 5 years after I left. So, but it's an experience that I think we all grow from. San Bernardino is a challenge, and every other city is a piece of cake. So,
Everybody has to be from somewhere.
that's true. That's true. So, do you want me to just proceed with kind of an? So the item before you, I'll apologize ahead of time. I'm not that familiar in terms of these details, so I may not be able to answer all of your questions, but the item before you tonight is to form a community facilities district, and it's a resolution authorizing that the Hemet Unified School District to do that, and then are entering into what's called a joint communities facilities agreement. The city bears no costs for this activity. The Hemet Unified School District will be the one that will develop the agreement and manage the program, ensure that the properties that are being proposed by the developer, which consists of 92 homes, will be assessed properly and placed on the tax rolls as required. It is a method for the developer to finance our development impact fees or DIF fees, and the estimate on this one is approximately $638,000 in DIF fees that this project will be generating. And so it's a method for the developer to be able to have a way to finance it and then be able to pay the development impact fees as he develops the property. And with that, I'll be happy to try to address any of your questions.
Start with Carly.
All right. Have we ever done this before?
That I'm not familiar with.
I don't know if we've entered into a specific type of agreement like this.
We have on several of occasions. Most of them were in the early 2000s when there was a lot of development. For a long time, the city had sort of a standing policy that it would not initiate its own communities facility districts, and allowed the Hemet Unified School District to take the lead. The last large one I can recall was McSweeney Farms project, where we had not only our development impact fees financed, but an additional fire station mitigation fee was paid out of that. And then there's been a long hiatus. This is the first one that I remember coming up in quite some number of years. It's the city could have taken the lead on it, but I guess the school district had reason to do it.
Okay, and so my next question is, obviously then the school district has experience doing this.
Yes.
It has been a while.
I don't know what the school district's experience has been during the slowdown with us. I don't recall them doing a joint community facilities district with us for some number of years between, I don't know, 2007 and starting last year or so.
Okay, so I go through the resolution, and it has in here, the city does not desire to allocate city resources and city staff time to the formation and administration of community facilities district, to the issuance of bonds. And so, I mean, we're voting on this, and we're saying that, but we have CFDs already. This is kind of what we do, right? We don't want to use staff time, but the next paragraph goes into the development project will promote economic development, but we don't want to do the work. Kind of just down on line 21, page 4 of 30, it has the city council is fully advised in this matter. Oh, I'm glad to know that. Just because you write it down doesn't mean it is. The next page, page 5, section 3. The resolution and the agreement it embodies are determined to be in the best interest of the residents of the city and the future residents of the area within the community facilities district. I guess I just have a problem like having, letting them have the money, and then we have to, we act like it's not going to be a bunch of work, but if you get into the details of what it's actually entailing, I mean, page 8, it talks about the city's agreement prior to submitting a disbursement request, requesting payment from the CFD. So the city has to pay the developer and then get refunded by the school district. That doesn't seem right either. That's
not right.
We're going to front the money? Well,
It's one of the options that can occur. There are a number of different funding scenarios, one of which is that the city can proceed, the developer can advance funds, or we can all wait until bond funds are put into the improvement fund.
So when we have, again, we go into these contracts that are, we have lots of optional language. And so it's, it's kind of a red flag. If you go into the actual agreement, on page 2 of the agreement, the school district will have sole discretion and responsibility for the formation of this and the administration. Then the next section, F, says the agreement constitutes a joint community facilities agreement. So then we go down to recitals. Each of the above recitals in the incorporated herein is true and correct. So it's true that they have sole discretion, and it's true that it's joint. It's just lots of contradictory language. And another big question I have is, since we only are 4 council members here and we're voting on something this big, it seems like to wait till there's 5. We said, it does say in here that we're looking out for the best of the city. So if we vote yes on this, are we?
So we have the
There's a lot of...
Councilmember, we have the applicant on the line, Jeffrey Holbrook, who can probably provide a little bit of background, the reasons why Hemet Unified chose to take the lead on this, and address some of the other questions that you had, including the requesting of the payment of the diff and how that all gets squared away. So Jeff, if you could provide some background on that to address the council member's question, that would be appreciated.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. And by the way, had I known this was a public hearing item, I would have been out there. So, but let me just say that I've been waiting 10 years to restart this project, a full decade, until Hemet's housing values recovered enough. We built 300 homes out there. They lost, when we shut down our project, Hemet's home values went down 52%. So I've been underwater for a decade. Mowing the weeds, patiently waiting, paying the property taxes until values were high enough where we could justify. And part of that justification was being able to create a CFD to pay some of my fees. Let me be really clear here. I'm not getting out of paying the diff fees. I'm paying the fees, and what will happen is the bonds won't get sold until 80% of these 92 homes get sold and closed. So the Hemet is getting its money I'm paying all of my fees to Hemet, and the bond company will come to me, and I'll ask them at some point in time, usually at least 80% of the homes sold and closed, then we can issue the debt. And at that point, then I would get reimbursed for the fees that I've paid. So Hemet's not going out of pocket on anything. And number one. Number two, why did we do a fee CFD? And I'll explain that, because that's the least impact to the homeowners. If I did a infrastructure CFD for improvements, that adds, and typically, and Eric, I think I see you across the room over there. I'm on Zoom as well. I think that adds a component of Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage, so we avoided doing that. The fee CFD is the most efficient way to finance part of the development costs, and so it's not impacting the city of Hemet one bit. I'm paying my fees to you. You're getting to collect those fees, and I don't get any of that money recovered until I sell the debt. And that is really at about 80% of the homes sold and closed. So I brought in EMWD into the CFD, and I brought the school district, and I asked Hemet to join as well. So it was a method for me to help offset some of the costs, and part of my justification for going forward with this project that's been, again, mothballed for 10 years. So I can answer any other questions you might have.
Jeff, could you touch on why the Hemet Unified School District took the lead on forming the CFD?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because the district will typically be the lead. EMWD will be the lead if they have 150 homes or more. That's their threshold. In this case, we didn't have 150. We only have 92 left. And so the district stepped up and said they would be the lead. So it was simple as that. So. Other questions?
More questions from council? I guess my question more is for our city attorney. I know you commented that this is not that unusual, but it's first time that, since I've been on the council, that we've come across this kind of an option. So
it is in fact not unusual. It is a standard development practice to allow the developer to finance and get reimbursed for very expensive public facilities, and in this case, DIF fees. The agreement that the JCFA does allow for a number of different options. And it allows for a number of different options because as they go towards the closing of everything, the bond market is up and down. We're not sure what the housing market does. So that's why I said it, as Mr. Holbrook said, one of the options is that the developer advances all of the fees. He just pays the fees like he normally would pay, and then he'll get reimbursed back out of the development impact fees. Another way to do that is to go out and fund, and you get your bond funds, and we get paid, and he gets a credit. Sometimes the economic circumstances don't allow for that. So there are a number of different options. The language is flexible to allow for all of that, but I have seen, I can't even count how many of these over the years, and this is a fairly standard format. Ultimately, the developer is responsible to the city. Even if the school district, which does have the full discretion to issue bonds, even if they decided we're not issuing bonds, Mr. Holbrook still has to pay the city the fees in order to get his development project off the ground. It's better if the school district goes forward with that, but since they're the lead agency in this transaction, they get to make that call. There's also language in the JCFA that says that the developer and the school district will make the determination of how much bond proceeds get put into the fund that the city would receive money out of. But in this case, the developer's advancing all of the funds, so we likely won't get into that. That is kind of typical flexible language in these types of transactions. The city is not in a position of liability with the agreement. It's not going to have to advance funds. If the developer doesn't pay, then the developer doesn't get its permits. We still retain that control.
I got a
I just did,
question.
council members, I completed one just now. We sold the debt 2 months ago in Corona. We just finished 148. And exactly what happened, we actually had 87% of the homes closed before the debt got issued. And it was the city DIP fees and the Corona Norco school district fees. It was very similar to what we're doing here. And again, I paid all my fees up front. I didn't get a penny reimbursed until I just got my reimbursement. It took a month and a half to finally get refunded all of my fees that I had paid 100% by that time. So by the time the debt got issued, I already fully paid 148 townhome fees already. So everybody had their money way before me getting reimbursed. And that'll be the case here, I'm certain.
Appreciate that. Councilmember Percival? Yeah, so there's the question I have, and Councilmember Meyer brought this up, but there's one of the whereas in there talks about the city council being fully advised in this matter. This is the first time I've seen language like that in a resolution. Is there a reasoning for that language being in there? Does it have anything to do with maybe other issues that the city has just finished dealing with? Can you explain?
No, it's one of the requirements for the issuance of bonds that all of the parties have been advised, seen the documents, know what the transaction entails, so that there's no claim later on from one of the receivers of funds that they didn't understand the transaction.
And then you had mentioned that the school district has the option of saying, we're not going to issue the bonds. How would that impact this project and moving forward if they were to do that?
I imagine Mr. Holbrook can answer that question better, but there won't be the funding and financing he's looking for the public facilities. So I imagine that would have a significant negative effect on the project.
What would happen here, and I can just answer that, Eric, what would happen is I'd be out all of my fees, and if for some reason, and I can't imagine why, the bond the bond didn't get issued, I'm the one on the hook. I've already paid my fees at that point. The city got their fees, the ENWE got their fees, the school district got their fees, because as Eric said, I can't get building permits until I pay these fees. So the person at risk is sitting here in Orange County right now on the phone. I'm the one at risk. Nobody, and then no disrespect meant, but you're not at all at risk. I'm the one that's out the millions of dollars in fees if the debt, for some reason, got held up. And I can't imagine what would happen, why that would happen. That what could happen is, if you really want to know, is I can get less proceeds out depending on the bond rate at the time the debt's issued, right? So they size these CFDs based on a certain bond rate. Well, that's the crystal ball game here. If the bond rates go in the wrong direction, I get shorted. You've already been paid all your fees. I'm the one that takes less. So the 100% of the risk is on me.
Okay. Appreciate that information.
Yes, and Mr. Holbrook, don't take this personally, but the questions that I have are more on business that has been conducted in the city of Hemet and things that have not been completed over the years. So all of my comments are not directed towards you or your development. We're excited to see you build houses. I just want you to
I've
know
taken
that.
it personally, and
I just need you
have
to know that.
absolute confidence in the project we just started. Otherwise, I would have signed for $6 million worth of loans and subdivision bonds, which I'm personally guaranteeing as well. So
Excellent.
I've got a great interest in this project going well.
Okay. What I want to avoid is we have this temp fee issue over with D.R. Horton, and these are deals that go bad. And so I don't want to have another deal that goes bad. An agreement that in however many years something happens and where's the money and was Hemet supposed to get that money? Those kinds of things happen. It also is, the development and having the school board to take the lead is a red flag. I mean, we have a incident that happened at West Valley, and because whoever wants to be blamed for it, we get to take the tab because of the tragedy that happened out there. It's still not fixed. It was that on the school board, but there was a partnership with the school board, but we got the bill. So, I have a little angst jumping right back into another contract.
Linda, did you have a comment or question?
It's apples and oranges. It really is. And Jeff, it's good to see you again. Good to see you back in Hemet. This is Linda Krupa. I have no issues with this contract and with the school district taking the lead on it. It takes some burden off our staff, and you get to deal with them. And
I do.
The city gets, bottom line, the city gets their deputies, and we also get a development, and that to me is the important thing. I have faith in Jeff. Yes, I have seen it work before, and I've seen Jeff get projects done, and he does them well. He really does. He has a lot of integrity. I've known him for many years before I got on council, and I don't have an issue with this at all.
Yeah, I just, in full disclosure, I talked to Jeff probably a couple weeks ago about this project, and my concern is adding, at Stony Mountain Ranch, the current development that's there doesn't have the CFD currently, and now these additional homes being built. I'm glad he's going to build homes. But now that these homes are going to have a CFD, and so that's the heartburn that I've had. But Jeff, I want to see this project built. I want to see those the homes over there finished. I wish there was another route that you could go without putting a CFD on there, but
I see a lot of things coming up with all of the new homes that are coming in.
Yeah. It just adds to the cost of the housing.
And I think that's a valid perspective, and that's something that the developer, I'm sure, has taken into consideration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's got to market those too. I think from my perspective, I've talked with a number of the neighbors in that development there that exists, and the sense that I was getting is they're anxious to see the full development completed. They had some concerns about the material, the building material that was left, basically just fenced off with a chain link fence, and so they were anxious to see some progress on that. So I'm happy to see that potentially come to fruition, and I appreciate the input from our city attorney as well, because I'm looking at the staff report. I always look at the section that says fiscal impact, and I'm happy to see no fiscal impact, and I think I've become convinced that at least fiscally the city's not at risk here on this situation, and I'd like to see the project finished. So if there is no further comments or questions, somebody want to try a motion?
Are we fully advised of the matter now? Fully advised in this matter?
The document means we're fully advised. If none other, I will make a motion to approve 13D.
I have a motion to approve item 13D. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Thank you for joining us virtually.
And I'm sorry there was a misunderstanding. I would have been out there. I don't normally miss these things, so I appreciate you letting me dial in.
No problem. You were still able to participate.
A different world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good
Moving
night.
on to item 14, discussion and action items.
Mayor, I'm going to be presenting the staff report on this item today. We're asking the city to consider what's called a voluntary compliance agreement with HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, FEO. As you know, HEMIT is a federal Community Development Block Grant, CDBG for short, recipient. FEO instituted a compliance review with regard to the city's compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 over a year ago. The FEO focused on the adoption and implementation of 3 ordinances that the city has put in place: the city's rental registration ordinance, the crime-free housing ordinance, and the chronic nuisance ordinance. You might remember that the rental registration and crime-free housing ordinances were enacted in 2013. They are respectively ordinances 1870 and 1873 and can be found at HEMIT Municipal Code sections 18446 through 18474. The chronic nuisance ordinance was adopted a year earlier in 2012, ordinance 1815, and it can be found at HEMIT Municipal Code section 460 through 467. At the end of its review, FEO identified potential issues, and it's important to note that FEO didn't make any findings. So these issues are not determined, not conclusive. They focused on several areas of what I'll call potential concern, one of which was the conduct of the city's contractor that implemented the crime-free housing program. Another were statements that were made during the adoption of the ordinances above. They also focused on the reprogramming of CDBG funds by the city away from direct assistance programs benefiting low and moderate income housing to running the rental registration and crime-free housing program with CDBG funds. And finally indicated that there could be possibly a disproportionate impact on low and moderate income tenants based on how these programs were implemented. I will add that we did contest and challenge these assertions and their concerns along the way. The city attorney's office, along with city manager's staff, has worked with FEO on a non-litigious way to resolve their concerns. They like to do that by means of a voluntary compliance agreement. We're bringing this to you tonight for discussion and consideration. One, because we feel we've gotten as far as we can with FEO at this point and have obtained the maximum deal we're going to get from them. And they are pushing us to get you to consider and approve this. So your options tonight really are to approve and then timely implement the voluntary compliance agreement or reject the voluntary compliance agreement and then contest the process. That process would be essentially that FEO then holds an evidentiary hearing and issues formal findings. Based on what their findings are, they either submit those findings to the Federal Department of Justice, who then does its own review and investigation and can file a lawsuit against the city. Even if the DOJ doesn't file a lawsuit, as it recently did against the city of Hesperia in very similar circumstances. Adverse written findings by FIO can negatively affect the city's award of CDBG funds in future years. So in order to avoid that, we tried to explore with FIO doing a voluntary compliance agreement. It was largely drafted by HUD. Erica Vega of my office revised it several times along with input from city manager's staff, and we end up with what I'm going to outline are not all, but the salient, I think, most important deal points that are in the agreement for your consideration. First, there's no omission of fault or liability by the city. There's no fines or penalties that are being imposed on the city. There's no FIO finding of unlawful practices or violation of the Civil Rights Act. And FIO will cease any further action or investigation against the city on this. The city is required, however, to take several actions with agreed-upon time limits. The city must acknowledge the requirement to comply with the Civil Rights Act. The city must stop enforcing the rental registration, crime-free, and chronic nuisance ordinances. The city then has to repeal all of those ordinances. The city agrees to provide a notice approved by HUD that it is discontinuing and then subsequently repealing the ordinances, and post that on website, social media, direct mail, and instances directed by FIO, and it has to publish it in the newspaper, a little eighth of the size of ad. There is no direct claims notification requirement by the city. It was an issue that we discussed extensively with FIO, and we're happy to have that requirement removed. The city does have to stop using CDBG funds to fund the rental registration, crime-free, and chronic nuisance ordinance, although there's no corresponding reduction in CDBG funds or allocation for the city. So there's no penalty against the city going forward on that. And of course, you wouldn't use CDBG funds in the future because you're going to stop enforcing and then repeal these ordinances. The city does have to create what's called a language access program. HUD has language access programs are for limited English proficient persons, and they can include a number of different elements, which might include saying translating important documents into Spanish or other languages that HUD determines are appropriate given your demographics. Primarily it's Spanish, City of Hemet. It can also be having translators. It can also be city employees who are proficient with Spanish to help explain items as well. Perhaps the most significant element is that the city will have to create and implement and fund a program to provide financial assistance to property owners who rent to low and moderate income families within the city. That assistance can either be to help improve low and moderate income housing, improve the owner's property for that, or to remediate code violations. The program funding that's required by FIO is $200,000. Although that sounds like a large amount, the city can expressly use CDBG funds to fund that program. There is no stated time by which it has to fund the program. A reasonable interpretation would be that since this is a 5-year long agreement, that program has to be implemented and that $200,000 expended over that 5-year horizon, whether that's $40,000 over 5 years or $50,000 over 4 years or some other. There's no requirement on that, although we do have to provide FIO with an implementation plan. Finally, the city cannot adopt ordinances that, in effect, try to do the same thing as the rental registration, crime-free, and chronic nuisance ordinances without first checking with HUD, having FEO review the ordinances if the city plans to administer and implement those ordinances with CDBG funds. If you're not going to implement it with CDBG funds, then you have some additional latitude. Those are the key elements of the agreement. I can try to answer your questions with regard to that along with the help of the city manager. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that overview. I'll bring it back to council. Questions, city attorney?
Okay, so one of the things you brought up was the 5-year contract. So this is something that I feel is extortion, a little, obviously. But they're going to say this is a 5-year contract. So that means that after 5 years we can go back to our programs? I mean, that's kind of goofy on their part.
They will continue to monitor the city as FEO does on a time-to-time basis, but that's not part of the agreement. They just have a certain time limit because they want to primarily see that program operative and implemented over the 5 years. It's my understanding of why you have a 5-year term.
So this organization, this is the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. They are for crime-full neighborhoods. Is that what they're saying? And I know that you don't speak for them, but
I can say that no. They would say no. They're not for that. They are.
But we have to get rid of crime-free neighborhoods.
We have to get rid of the existing program we have that was adopted in the way it was adopted and implemented in the way it was implemented. They're not saying that we can't have programs that protect tenants or that help homeowners or that seek to not have crime in tenancies in the city. Have to do that in a way that doesn't disproportionately affect low and moderate income persons or persons of color.
And they think that we do that right now because this in here says, I mean, it says preliminary, and it says things like, you're not guilty of this. And so I feel like they're threatening us, essentially. So we have to stop for 5 years. The parties of the period for 5 years from the effective date of the agreement. And after that, you can go back to... so is this going to help crime or hurt crime?
It very much depends on the way the city chooses to implement its program and whether or not it wants to have an effective crime-free housing program in the future. I can't speak to how effective any of these 3 programs were. I have to turn that over to the city manager.
So one of the things specifically on this program was that it was never given to specific staff members to oversee. The program that HUD is referencing in this item is a program that was managed primarily by a consultant that the city had. That consultant is no longer with the city, and that person hasn't been with the city for over a year now. And so this specific program and the references within are not being administered currently because there is no staff associated with that program.
They refer to the name of a program inside of this agreement. They're not even in existence. I can even find them online.
Page 7 of 13.
But it named an organization that I did not find.
Yeah, and that organization does not work for the city of Hemet.
So this is just something that is essentially cleanup, and we are cleaning up something. And
yeah, as the city attorney mentioned, it's not any sort of admission of anything. It's simply just cleaning up some of the items that could potentially be problematic for the city if the city chooses not to enter into this agreement with HUD.
Because I feel like by approving this, that we're saying that we are against crime-free neighborhoods. So,
Yeah, I think the issue with respect to what you bring up is primarily revolving around the title of the program. Essentially, the issue that we have here on that same page that you alluded to, or the section with respect to the organization, it really comes down to the implementation of the program wasn't necessarily in line with the items that the council had adopted in the ordinances. So that's where we talk about when we build programs, are we allocating the appropriate level of staff or management to oversee that the implementation of those programs are being done with the intent of what was adopted by the council.
and the other thing is they say that this is not punitive, but there is training required.
There is training, yes. Oh, sorry, yes, I missed that bullet point. We all get to have training.
But they probably need to stay in their lane. Maybe they need to be trained about crime.
You would be
Handle
welcome
crime.
to bring that up with their representatives.
I would love to. So I think there can be compromise here. We're quite aware of what people's civil rights are. So for them to talk to us like we don't know is, not appropriate. I mean, we could say the same about them.
Linda?
Yes. I was here when these things were done. All of these ordinances went through the ROCS committee, the Citizens ROC committee, and came up. And I would say that the main thrust and idea was to protect tenants. I mean, we had some houses that I went out and inspected where raw sewage and everything else was coming out of the bathroom and onto the ground and out into the street. Some of the electrical was just scary. Window air conditioners that were so covered in black mold that nothing could happen. And people were living in these conditions, and the only arm of the only stick that the city had at that time was to create ordinances that put some teeth into protecting tenants and forcing less than honorable landlords to fix up their property. And I mean, this really kind of took me aback because we spent a lot of time researching and discussing how do we protect tenants from substandard housing. And the result was these ordinances. If we have to repeal them, then my question is, what can we put in its place to protect the tenants that are living in these places that need to basically be supervised, and for the city to have to put money into a property owner's property because they refuse to have habitable. It's not a crime to be poor, and poor people should not be penalized because they can't afford a better rental. But they've got rights, and I agree with that. And that was the whole idea of this, was to protect those tenants from landlords that were not necessarily doing things in their best. I mean, it's a health and safety issue, and this is what we came up with. There's got to be some way to maintain some type of control for health and safety for renters than totally repealing these things. Or you've got to put something in place. We can't have people, and it's poor people that get into these situations, and they shouldn't have to live in filth and in harmful, unsafe apartments because a landlord refuses to make them habitable.
I certainly can't speak for HUD or FIO, and I'm not going to advocate for them. But my sense of talking with my colleague who spent quite some time speaking with their team is that what you've just articulated, they would be very supportive of. Now, they have a particular way in which they like to go about doing those things. So I think the city has a couple options. You're going to have to repeal your existing structure. But if your concern is as you've articulated, Mayor Pro Tem, then we can either work with HUD on a program that would meet their acceptance, then on which then you could use CDBG funds, or you can do a non-CDBG funded program. One of the things that got the city in trouble in this case was it started this as a non-CDBG program and then it funded it through CDBG. That's how it got the scrutiny of HUD. And HUD has a very particular mission. And I will remind you that this is this administration's HUD. If we don't do this agreement, there is a significant chance that we will be dealing with another administration's HUD, and might not have as much reason to work with us as they have. And unfortunately, I will say to council, we're really laboring under some bad facts. The FIO team went back and listened to the tapes of this being adopted and drew out specific comments that were made on the record that they took issue with. And they interviewed people who had interactions with our consultant. And our consultant didn't help us in this instance because some of the actions were concerning to HUD. And if you want to have a closed session with regard to that, I can go into more detail. But suffice it to say, HUD was concerned of some of the conduct. So, but for those two or three elements, I think we would be in a different situation. So I don't think that you have to look at this as you can't go back and have some kind of, I'm not going to call it crime-free because that's what crime-free, but safety program, health and safety program for tenants. That was the original, whatever HUD thinks. I was there for those two. We did spend a lot of time on them, and that was the original purpose behind this. And we've indicated that to the FIO team with enough success to get them to the voluntary agreement and not go forward.
I understand when you take federal funding, you go under federal guidelines, and sometimes they're hard to swallow.
Extremes.
Michael. Chomping at the bit. This is a real estate related issue. When I was on the Planning Commission, I had conversation with Councilmember Milne at the time, and I told her that I was adamantly opposed to these ordinances because they were, for many reasons. One, they were taking away private property rights, and I'm fully supportive of crime-free housing because crime-free housing is a separate issue from what HUD's looking at are violations of the Civil Rights Act and anything that could be construed as taking away something from a protected class. And if I were to do some of the things that are listed in these ordinances, I would lose my license and could potentially go to prison. I think that some of the language that's in that contract is helpful to the city of Hemet in protecting the city from potential lawsuits. By saying that we didn't, that we're not in violation, I think some of that language is very helpful. And from a real estate standpoint, I think that there are, even if we were to repeal all of these ordinances, I think the city still has plenty of tools in the toolbox to be able to address a lot of these issues that deal with crime and deal with tenants and the substandard conditions that tenants live in. The building code is one, I think, but then it goes back to a staffing issue. Do we have staffing levels that can then look at these and this be their sole focus? Tenants have a responsibility. when they live in housing that's substandard, they need somebody to call to say, hey, I've addressed these issues with my landlord, and my landlord refuses to take them up. So what are my recourses? I think there's those issues. Do I think that some tenants are taken advantage of? Absolutely, I do. I think there's landlords out there that do take advantage of tenants, and I think that's absolutely wrong. But then it comes back to the tenant then has an obligation. Do they stay in that substandard living condition, or do they find other living quarters to move to? There are programs out there that can help people get out of those, and I think there's some programs that might be funded by CDBG to be able to get people out of those kind of conditions. So, from my perspective, I think that this is a step in the right direction, because I've never been supportive of these. It goes back to a comment that I made on a previous item, that we can have all of the regulations in the world, but if we have nobody to enforce them, what good are they? And I think that goes back to this. The PD's got a lot of tools that they can use to deal with the crime element, without how do I got to tread lightly on this? Without violating the rights of the protected class. There's plenty of tools out there. Same thing with our ordinances and our code. There's plenty of tools that could be used to be able to get the tenants that are living in substandard housing out, or dealt with the landlords that are not keeping up their properties. And I think it comes back to property owners that are landlords who shouldn't be landlords in the first place, because one, they don't have the resources to be able to maintain their properties, or two, they're not pricing their properties where they should be to be able to take care of their properties. So I think that's one of it, but I think the language in this is specifically to be able to protect the city from future lawsuit because of the language that's in there. So I think that and I don't disagree with that we're being extorted. Yeah, we are to an extent, but I think that it's in a direction that's kind of protecting the city in a way that by not coming out and say you're violating people's rights and these ordinances are a violation of the Fair Housing Act. I think that would be doing the city a disservice if they were to come out and say that. So I think that from my perspective, this is a move in the right direction. And again, with the police officers that we have in our city are very resourceful, and I think that they would be able to, as far as the crime element goes, I think our officers are able to get around it without this ordinance. And the same thing with code enforcement. There's tools that they have that they don't need these specifically to be able to address those issues. Because I have those same concerns. I mean, there's been plenty of houses that I've walked into it that I've just opened the door and said, I can't walk in there. It's that bad. And people lived in that. And it's unfortunate.
Mayor, if I might, I'd like to follow up on what Councilmember just said. That it's an excellent point, because all of our Hemet Rocks teams didn't utilize the rental registration ordinance, the crime-free housing ordinance, or chronic nuisance. And it's important to point out that this FEHO action and agreement doesn't do anything with our existing health and safety provisions. It doesn't do anything with our public nuisance provisions, and it doesn't take out, or we don't have to repeal the gang and drug abatement ordinance, which I think has been very important for the Hemet Rocks team.
Well,
I was just going to say, in reading through some of those of actions that would create a chronic nuisance, most of them aren't illegal in California anymore anyway. I mean, doing drugs in the street is not illegal. Selling drugs on the street, not illegal. So, there you go.
Well, I think there's been very good points brought up by all council members and by the city attorney on this. I think my perfect, and I don't disagree with those valid points that have been made. From my perspective, we live in a world of compromise, and I view this as a compromise that's going to provide an opportunity for us to avoid having to experience potential litigation. We're mindful of trying to curtail those litigation fees. I think it's also an opportunity, as Councilmember Percival pointed out, to explore other options to accomplish the objectives that Mayor Pro Tem pointed out to protect the tenants. I don't disagree with Councilmember Meyer's description of this as a form of extortion, because we're the little guy. This is David and Goliath, and the federal government is the big boss, and they can print money. We can't do that. So I think that it's an opportunity for us to go back and revisit and find other alternatives to achieve what we really wanted to achieve with this in the first place, and that's to protect the rights of tenants and the health and safety of the tenants and address the crime concerns all at the same time. And I agree, we have a lot of tools in our tool belt that we can use to achieve that. So, and I appreciate the fact that we can use CDBG funds to start addressing some of that going forward. So that's kind of how I see it.
You have one more thing I'd like to. The city, with this program, the city had partnered with the Association of Realtors. The Association of Realtors provided a venue for the contractor to be able to do the crime-free housing element of this program. And because they were in the association's facility, I was able to go in, sit in, and listen. And some of the things that the individual that was teaching that some of the things that were said were, I kind of had to be, that should probably be looked into. So I think that individual put the city in a precarious situation based on some of the comments that were made during those trainings.
Question for Eric also.
Yes.
Now you said that we are not like our enforcement right now, we are not maybe citing those programs. We are enforcing with other means anyways.
I believe so, yes. I cannot recall a single case where we've brought somebody up for a violation of the rental registration, crime-free. The crime-free program was really something different.
Our police chief is nodding.
Yeah, or the chronic nuisance ordinance.
Because, regardless of the demographic or nationality or anything, all of our citizens deserve to feel safe. And so as long as, us doing this, we're going to address these issues, because getting rid of crime-free sounds absolutely awful.
It sounds like an invitation.
Yeah,
Getting
it does.
neighbors to come in and take over neighborhoods.
And so I think our wording is going to have to be very specific, too, on our posts and whatever they want us to be advertising, because this isn't, we're getting rid of crime-free, have fun, Yes, it is a very bad message. So hopefully
Definitely
we can
not
use...
a green light to go commit all kinds
Yes,
of things.
yes, and I feel like that. So,
Or like a red light.
right.
Okay. Good discussion. Good points brought up by all. And I'm ready to see if somebody wants to make a motion on this item 14A.
I'll move approval of 14A, recommendation to approve voluntary compliance agreement and authorize city manager to execute.
Okay?
You beat me to it. I'll second it.
One second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, City Attorney.
Thank you, Council.
Good discussion, Council. Moving on to 14B. Resolution declaring city-owned property as surplus land in conformance with the Surplus Land Act, California Government Code Section 54-220 et sequitur, as amended on January 1st, 2020. And we have a staff report. City attorney. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor.
City something.
City staff, yeah. Back in September, this item was brought to council. We had some discussion, we had some conversation about this specific item. The item failed 2-2. At the previous council meeting, the council directed staff to bring this item back to council for discussion and consideration. It should be noted that there is a map that locates all of the properties throughout the city of Hemet. It should be noted that there is one property, which is Covell, that the council may want to talk about in terms of a future use. And when the council adopted the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget, there was direction provided there to consolidate engineering into public works. And so we will be moving forward with that this fiscal year. And so the plan is to take all of the existing staff that's in Covell and consolidate them into existing city facilities to help streamline with development activity and help bridge the gaps between the departments and the operations that really should be coordinating together. So that is an item that the council may want to spend some time discussing. But then if the council would also like to talk about some of the other properties, happy to have a conversation about those as well, Mayor.
Okay. I know Councilmember Percival would like to offer comments on it.
I do. So this is something that I had requested to bring back, and the reasoning behind bringing it back is that the Covell building and the other properties, and this is rooted in the change in state law that was recently passed, that went into effect about surplus properties, and I think that with them all being bundled and having the Covell building in there also, I think that's kind of what had where I had heartburn on it the last time around. But these other properties, they're small, they're infill properties, and I really think that the city doesn't have a use for them. As far as the Covell building, I think that should be taken off of this specific item, and the city should hold on to that. I think that there could be future city use for that building because it is an existing building. But the other properties are either small vacant lots. One of them is actually a residential building that has been used for training. Or seeing the pictures now, it's being used for storage, but it's a building that's all boarded up, and I don't think that.
It was literacy to start off with, and I think that's something.
Yeah, and I think in the way the housing market is today, I think if that building were to be let go, that the city might be able to get a benefit from it financially based on what they purchased it for at the time it was purchased. I think so. Those are I think the Covell building should be taken off of this, and the city should hold on to that.
Okay. Harley, comments?
I'm going to still vote no, because if the state wants to control the city, then they need to take over the city. If they want us to do it as elected officials, then we get to decide.
Just a couple questions, and I think this was the same question I asked the last time these came out, that this is like the first step to put something on the market. There's no requirement anywhere going down the line that we sell any of these properties. It's just that other agencies would get first dibs if they went live. Is that correct?
A little different procedure now. It is the first step. In order to dispose of any property now, unless it's exempt, we have to go through this surplus property process, which essentially means we've got to give notice to school districts, park and rec districts, and qualified affordable housing developers. I think there's another category, to see if they want to use it. If they express an interest, then we have to go through a 90-day good faith negotiation period with them. We're under no obligation to sell the property for less than fair market value, although we have the option to do so, especially if it's for open space or park and rec or affordable housing, not for commercial uses. So if we go through that process, we get no statements of interest, or we just can't work out a deal, then we've satisfied the process and we can dispose of it like we used to under one of the different processes, whether it's through direct negotiation or go out for RFP, and we could sell it for unrestricted residential development, or we could sell it for commercial or industrial as the site's suitable for. And we could change our mind. Let's say we put something in surplus, we go through the process, we don't have any interest, and it sits on our inventory. The city could always go back and say, hey, well, we do have a public use for that now. Now it's no longer surplus, and you could reactivate it.
Part. I don't know if I was zoning on that or what, but okay, it's approved, it goes out to the 90 day, whatever. At the end of that 90 day, because there's some commercial businesses that have interest in at least 2 of the properties. At the end of that 90-day period, we can sell to them, correct?
At the end of that 90-day period, if no one submits any interest within 60 days, we're free to sell it to whoever we want to.
Okay.
If a qualifying entity submits a statement of interest, we have to negotiate with them in good faith for a 90-day period, unless it's clear that the parties are just not going to reach an agreement earlier. At the end of that negotiation period, if we still can't come to terms reasonably and we have reason to sell it, then we've also completed our obligation. For example, let's say it was an affordable housing project and they couldn't afford to pay fair market value. We can't be forced not to sell it for fair market value. We could then say, look, fiscal restraints of the city really require us to sell it for fair market value. You could then sell it to somebody if there was a buyer for fair market value.
Well, I certainly have an issue with the state interfering once again with local control. I think we would all agree that that's not a desirable situation, and one of the reasons why you have things like CCAs developing for energy, like our WCE agreement. That's an effort by local government to retake control over things that directly impact them. So fundamentally, I'm totally in agreement with how you see that. But I also know that the reality is that we have some parcels that we could probably benefit from the sale of, and I'm not supposed to end a sentence with a preposition, but
Especially not for dangles.
no. So, no, that's participles. So, but, and I do know that of at least one little parcel that commercial entity is interested in wanting to do something, which I think would, conversations I've had with them would be a nice benefit to the city. I do agree that I'm not ready to include the Covell property right now in this. I think I'm fine with the other parcels because it is infill, but I'd just soon hold off on doing it with Covell. Not that I'm opposed to any of the organizational adjustments that city manager is talking about, and at some point when those are in place, we could certainly entertain other options with that property. But I think it's the necessary evil that we have to walk this walk until such time as we get the League of California Cities to muster up gumption to have 54-220 et sequitur repealed or amended so that we get our local control back. So that's kind of my take on the whole situation. So, if there are no further comments, somebody want to try a motion on item 14B?
I'll move to approve, subject to taking the Covell property out of the resolution.
I have a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation, but excluding the Covell property. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer,
No.
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes, that motion passes 3-1. Moving on to item 14C, our update on the COVID-19. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, the council adopted an emergency declaration back March 16th, and the council directed that we provide an update every council meeting thereafter. There are two main items of concern or of significance, and that has to do with the regression of the county into the lowest tier. As a result of that, many businesses had to close their operations and go throughout some more difficult instances as it stands. There's some other additional detail within the staff report. There is one specific item that we will ask for council direction on, and that has to do with an event being hosted by My City Youth, and they have requested to borrow city equipment, some cones and other type of materials to coordinate some traffic control. We've asked them to coordinate any sort of permitting or review of plans with our engineering team. But I do know that My City Youth is a very prominent organization in the community, and they do good work in the community. There is, because of the impact to the budget, we didn't move forward with any sort of in-kind funding for any sort of nonprofits in the community, whether that be direct monetary or in-kind contributions. Now, that also, too, is as a result of reprioritizing some of the items in the budget. We don't anticipate that the borrowing of this equipment will necessarily create an impact on staff. Now, we would make the request that they pick up the items and that they do the setup as appropriate so that the staff who is running on a bare bones operation right now isn't coordinating any sort of the setup or the tear down for that and allocating any staff time to that. So we allocate, or we estimate about 2 hours that would be needed to gather the items, prepare for pickup, and then once they're received, to go ahead and put them away. That's probably being over generous, but that's really what we're dealing with here tonight, Council. So that concludes the report that I have for the Council Mayor.
Just a quick question on that. Would I presume that this is for their traffic control for their event?
That's correct.
I personally don't have any problem with them providing the labor. If we gather it, they pick it up, set it up. I would like to see us provide some oversight on how it's set up so that it's properly directing and addressing any traffic safety issues. I think we need to have some staff oversight on that, but I don't have any qualms about it's a good program and worthy cause.
If I could just add to that, My City Youth originally was just going to do the Bags of Love on the Thursday night, and the Ramona Bowl group, who usually does Blue at the Bowl, which is 2 to 3 to 4 day event during Halloween. Cannot have it this year because of COVID, so they approached my city youth and said, how would you like us to come down and decorate your property with all of our blow-ups and ghosts and goblins and pumpkins and all of that stuff, and make a big deal for the kids downtown, so that not everybody loses out like they're doing this year. And my city youth thought that was a great idea, so the Ramona Bowl, Boo Bowl, is going to be Boo at my city youth, and it's going to be on Friday night, the night before Halloween. Lots of volunteers, not only from the bowl, but from the Rotary Club and several others that are stepping forward in donation of candies and setup and that type of thing. And I have I have a feeling it's going to be a big event, which is good. I mean, kids and families need something, and if it's just to drive through and, you know, look at people dressed up in non-scary costumes, as we've been told to not be scary, and, you know, to get some enjoyment for a few minutes of driving through there and get rewarded with candy and then go home and tear the house apart because they're high on sugar. I think it's something that is extremely beneficial, and there are a couple police volunteer people that are always over there for eyes on, to because it is a way that we all get to see the kids, and we also get to see the parents, because there are times when abuse does happen, and it's a good prevention, and it's also just a good way of keeping track with kids and parents. So I'm definitely in favor of this.
What? Sure. Thank you for the update. Considering COVID's still the only thing going on in the world, we saw what happened to the last national event, which was 4th of July. There was fireworks going off everywhere because people are tired of being on house arrest. So the good thing is COVID hopefully will be over in a week. That's all I have. There'll be another travesty to have to deal with after that.
All right, thank you for the update. Do you have anything?
I like that we have the opportunity for people to go and pick up equipment. What we have to, and I think that will help with staff time, and I think that's new this year. I mean, that's new this time. We tried to work on it a little bit last year for our special events. I think it's important for the city to work with organizations, because only we have these things. But we need to be able to bestow them on anyone that wants to come and ask, not just for a group that we especially approve of. And so we've got to be careful with all that. I say any, but you know what I'm saying?
What we're trying to get in the habit of is having the council weigh in on this, because I believe in prior years it would be something that was done behind the scenes, potentially by staff, and some organizations were denied and some other organizations were not. So we're trying to create as level of a playing field as possible, so that we don't get, staff at least doesn't get put in the position of being accused of being favorable to one organization and not favorable to others. So it's not perfect, but we're trying to do our best to provide an equal level playing field for groups moving forward.
And giving them the work so that it minimizes what our burden is.
That's correct.
Like that.
Yeah, and I guess my only comment is I'm disappointed that the county was not able to convince the state to keep this in the less restrictive tier. And I'm just going to editorialize briefly, I guess, that I'm frustrated by the fact that the state has established what they claim to be a simplified 4-tier process to help jurisdictions move in a less restrictive direction. But when you dive into the weeds of these tiers, there are pages and pages of metrics that I think only a mathematician could begin to even comprehend. And when they start requiring counties to differentiate portions of the county with a different positivity rate because they are socially, economically disadvantaged, I don't recall seeing a boundary line of within the county identifying such areas. So how in the world can you expect a county health officer to look at the county and try to determine? It's absolutely ludicrous. So I'll take my own advice that it's a David and Goliath story here, and eventually people will have had enough, and they'll make their voices heard through their ballots. So I'll end with that comment. So thank you for the update, City Manager.
Do you want a motion on? Yes, please. Okay. Then I will make a motion that the City Council approve My City Youth Center's request to borrow city resources for the annual Halloween event.
I'll second that.
Here we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Percival,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 15, City Council and staff reports. Councilmember Meyer.
I don't have, let's see, there was something that I was going to bring up. I don't have anything for my staff reports, but I do have a few questions. City hours at City Hall, I get a lot of questions about that, and people trying to turn in ballots. And it's hard for me not to be funny and say things like, COVID isn't working during 9 to 1. So I try not to, but sometimes that comes out. And so it's hard for me to explain short hours when people need help. And so I have that. And then, what was that other thing I told you I was going to ask about something else? Our planning commission, they skip meeting, or, they cancel meetings, and then they have like big meetings and cancel meetings and big meetings. And so one of our planning commissioners is frustrated because San Jacinto just has meeting after meeting. And, I don't want to say like, oh, we want to be like San Jacinto, but we want to have open doors. And so I understand staffing and everything because we've heard all of these things, but we have got to push it. If we're going to open the doors, then let's open the doors.
So 2 comments. The first one, we're trying to limit the numbers of people that come throughout the city, so that's why we've limited that. In terms of the hours that ballots are accepted, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. If individuals come and try and drop off a ballot, we've included also information on the doors that let them know where other locations are to accept ballots. So we do have that available on the door, and we also have that information available on the city's website. So that's where that is. In terms of the other items with the Planning Commission, oftentimes it has to do with the applicants. And so if the applicants aren't necessarily providing the items for the city to get the items through and ready for the Planning Commission, then obviously we can't force it if we don't have the documents. But that's the reality of what we have there. And then finally, I should add that we got to protect our employees overall. Over the last couple of months, we have had a couple other employees, new employees, that did test positive for COVID-19. And so when that happens, based on the rubric and the guidelines that we've established internally with how we take care of individuals that may have been in close proximity with them, or determined that folks were in contact with some of those folks that ended up testing positive. is that sometimes we have to send up to 7 employees home, and so that does create a bit of a workflow issue if we don't have the capacity internally to deal with the number of people that come in. So that's what we're trying to balance and trying to manage. I know it's difficult right now, but I know that the last employee that tested positive, we had to send a few employees home, and that does impact our operation. So I know it's a difficult situation, but that's really kind of the other layers that go on with that.
I understand all that, and I'm not going to argue about the planning commission stuff, but the public is frustrated. I mean, there was 10 people out there at 3 o'clock, and my phone blows up.
Are you referencing not being allowed into the planning commission meeting itself?
No, just put that one aside, but City Hall, period. So when there's 10 people out front, I get the phone call. There was an elderly man out there trying to get a permit, and on and on and on, and so I get the phone calls. And he works, and so he doesn't get home till 3 o'clock. And so then, I'll go on Friday. The joke's on him, and he was mad again.
Yep.
So it's hard, and the public is frustrated, especially when we are their city.
And we've done our best to try and make the resources available online, virtually, digitally. I know that some folks don't do it that way, but if you could forward his contact information, we'd be happy to reach out directly to him and maybe set up an appointment that works for him.
Michael. In line with that, government is essential, correct? So then government should be open, because other departments in government are out working and interacting with the public on a daily basis. I understand the importance that we need to protect our employees, but we need to protect all of our employees equally and not some more so than others. With that, if the city of Hemet is a government location that has an official ballot drop box, that drop box needs to be available. Because there's other locations that are non-governmental locations that are making their locations available. So Walmart is not more essential than government. But Walmart seems to stay open to meet the needs of the public. So with that, Planning Commission, they postponed a vote on a CUP. It's going to come back to the next Planning Commission meeting that deals with a tobacco store moving location. That was one of the things that came out of the Planning Commission. There was another item that came out. I don't know if it passed or because I wasn't able to watch the whole thing. RCA, the meeting will be at the first of the on Monday, the first Monday of November, and that's all I got for now. Linda?
A lot of them. The Library Board of Trustees had a meeting, but not enough people showed up, so they didn't have a meeting. However, a couple trustees were given a tour, so to speak, of how the flow of traffic will be once the library does open up, and how there will be one door coming in, and you go this way and go around, and another door going out that way, so that people are socially distanced and all of that good things. League of California Cities, the general meeting is going to be November 9th in Blythe, except it's going to be virtual. And
So it'll be in Hemet too.
Virtually Blythe. But it's going to be fun, so sign up for it, because we're going to play a Trivial Pursuit type game, apparently. Anyway, the other thing on the League of California Cities, I sat in on the mayor's meeting last week that Russ could not attend. And, of course, the subject of COVID came up, and Riverside County, and the disparities and unfairness of how rules and regulations are being applied, and in particular, the city of Blythe, who is in the middle of nowhere. They have no surrounding cities. They have no cases of COVID. They have no issues, and they're locked down.
So the lockdowns work.
Yeah, they can't go anywhere. I mean, it's just, as they said, the mayor said, it's really kind of crazy because the county as a whole is being ruled by one set of rules, and while Paris may have a high outbreak, Blythe has nothing. And many cities in between, I mean, Hemet doesn't have that many cases. So it really is, there's so much wrong with going there. But anyway, attend the meeting on the 9th. There may be some interesting conversation. On the Planning Commission, yes, the Tesla S2R, whatever the three letters of the Tesla manufacturing company, that was approved 4-0. RCTC, several things. If you're all interested, and I'll get you the link, the Inland Empire Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan was approved. It did have to go back for a couple corrections because they misspelled the word Hemet in numerous locations, and we became Helmet. So I brought that to their attention, and they just corrected it, and I got the new link.
But they didn't misspell multimodal.
No, multimodal corridor, comprehensive corridor plan came out absolutely fantastic. Also approved funding for the downtown layover expansion, which is Metrolink in Riverside, and for the La Sierra Station expansion in Metrolink, and also approved the final design funding for the extra lanes on the I-15 from Cajalco to Highway 74. We approved spending a whole lot of money. RTA, things are rolling along for them. Their buses are, ridership is coming up. Two high points that they are doing is that they are using their excess buses as hotspots for school kids in school districts because there's Wi-Fi on all of their buses. So they are being used as hotspots, which is good for distance learning. And they have also delivered 84,000 meals to homebound seniors through Feed America, which I think is absolutely awesome. SCAG is next week, and RCA I don't have to do. I did participate as an observer in 2 days of the JPIA, whatever the insurance company that we have. They did a 2-day virtual thing. It was really good. Kelly Rayner and I don't remember the other lady's name, talked on labor law, which was very, very interesting, and there were several points made on risk management and all of these things that it was good. And then today, highlight of my life, I was principal for a day at Bella Vista Elementary, and they are the Vikings, and I will say that my family is from Norway, so I thought it was rather appropriate. So I have my face mask, and I got a visor and a t-shirt, an apple and a banana because it's healthy, and then 2 candy bars, which are in my purse. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, I don't have that much. I did participate in the principal for the day as well. I was at Costin Elementary and got a brief tour of the campus before the virtual meetings. I have to say that it was very well done. Hats off to the technology staff with district. I know that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes work that made all that happen, but it was really nice to see firsthand how the teachers are doing virtual interactive schooling with the children. It's unfortunate that they have to do that, but it seems that the teachers and the students are adapting well. Kind of reminds me of the old military cliche of improvise, adapt, and overcome, and they're certainly doing that. The California JPIA annual board meeting is tomorrow evening, so I'll be participating in that on a virtual meeting as Hemet's representative. So I'll be reporting back on what happens after that. The RCOG executive meeting is Monday afternoon, so I'll give you that report another time. I'm working with staff to try to come up with some alternatives for annual events that are not being able to take place. So I'm working with Erica Murphy to put together a video message for Veterans Day. We've confirmed that the Exchange Club's still going to do their Field of Flags at Gibble Park, which is good. But in lieu of being able to hold the traditional ceremony at the Memorial Garden area, we're going to do a virtual one, and Erica is soliciting photographs from city staff and community members who have people who are veterans or have people that are serving, and we're hoping that we can incorporate that into the video message, that at least we're going to be doing something. And so that's about all I have to report right now.
So, on the veterans thing, you said are veterans or are active duty?
Mm-hmm.
So active duty.
Active duty, yeah. Anybody that's
Okay.
anybody, because
My
Veterans
daughter's not
Day
veteran, yeah.
includes active duty people too.
Okay. That simplifies my life.
They're veterans to be. But yeah, we're honoring all the people who are serving or have served with the military.
Very good. So Mike, send in your picture.
Okay. City manager. Oh, ad hoc. Council protocols. I've incorporated all of the input that the ad hoc committee had in the way of questions or suggested changes. I've emailed that new draft to the city attorney's office for their review and feedback. So we're moving along. And the CDBG CV ad hoc committee, nothing new to report, but it's coming forward on the next agenda, I believe.
I have a question on that, because we did the first allocations from the first CARES CDBG, but now we've got a second CARES CDBG, is that correct? So do we stay as an ad hoc and look at that at the same time? Because isn't that due sometime in December?
I don't know the deadlines, but the ad hoc should still remain together while we're going through this process to get both iterations of the CARES Act funding.
Personal opinion.
Okay. City manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. A few items to note. Principal for a day, I had a chance to go to Rancho Viejo Middle School today and had a chance to meet with Principal Zavala and see how they were just coordinating everything. Mayor Brown was in the same cohort as I was, and it was really fascinating. I made a comment about the fact that the principals are leading two different groups. They're leading the teachers that they have to oversee, but also at the same time the students. And so that with the challenges that are going on, there's a lot of challenges that go on with that. So they're doing incredible work and collectively just doing the best that they can to deal with the current circumstances. I too joined the JPIA sessions. I found them very helpful, very useful, and you can see the value that the city is now getting with having these virtual conferences and getting the information that we need to obviously minimize risk and look at the things that we should be doing to lessen our costs. There's one project that the Planning Commission approved last week that I don't know who mentioned it, and it was the Tesla project. And the applicant said something that I wanted to share with everybody and really thank the community development team. The applicant shared a story. One commissioner asked about why they chose the city of Hemet. And the applicant shared a remarkable story, and I won't say what agency it was, but the Tesla group had originally gone to a different agency and had stated that they just didn't feel like they were wanted. and they stumbled across the city of Hemet, and the city of Hemet made them feel, the staff did, that they wanted them in our community. And that's exactly what the staff does in community development day in and day out. We accommodate however we can, virtual meetings, and we try and take meetings if there's a new development, new business that wants to come in. We try our best to meet with those individuals within 48 hours of an inquiry coming in. And so I really want to send my appreciation to the community development team. We've got some new staff in that department, but the kudos goes to them. And that story that the applicant shared was really impressive, and I was really proud of the applicant when he said that. I personally have not met the applicant, but that was just a really good story that was good to hear. And then the last item was that the Measure U Oversight Committee met last Thursday. You'll recall that the city undertook an additional review of Measure U funds. The AUP's agreed upon procedures review were completed. I sent those over to the council. The Oversight Committee was pleased with the conclusion of the report. A separate auditor, which is separate and apart from our auditor that does our CAFR, confirmed the fund balances, reviewed the expenditures, reviewed the revenues, and confirmed that they were all in accordance within the ordinances and the resolutions that were established for fiscal year 17-18 as well as fiscal year 18-19. So it was a good, productive meeting, good discussion, and we'll be continuing on with that moving forward so that the council can get some more assurances and more confidence in the expenditures, the revenues associated with Measure U. So that's all I have for tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 16, future agenda items. But before I ask the question about anybody having something to add, let's see if we can take some of these off of here. Would the council be comfortable removing the vagrancy, panhandling laws, street vendor permit regulations, animal control, and review of penalties for fireworks, since we had the study session on that? I think I thought I heard council direction to up the fireworks penalty to the maximum of 1,000. I think there was consensus on that.
I would say if that can be brought back for council approval with the increase in the penalty at that time, we can take it off.
How about the items 3, 6, and 7?
I'll give you my personal opinion. I feel like we really haven't done anything.
We reviewed them, but we have to go forward and figure out what our changes will be then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know that we've given council or staff any direction on what to do or how to do it or what to look at or where.
Okay. We're making progress
the
in that
emphasis
direction.
should be, and how do we legally change some of this stuff? Because I think maybe we need more information.
Okay, so what am I bid for item 16, declaring city-owned surplus land? I think we took care of that tonight. And is that item 1, housing investment opportunities / vacant city-owned infill property? So is that the same as item 16 or something different?
That was.
So
I'll move
One.
to remove them both.
1 and
I'll move it.
16? So we have a motion to remove item 1 and 16. And a second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Percival?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Krupa?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes. Okay, well, we've got 2 of them off the list. Anybody have anything they want to add? Hearing none. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned to the next City Council meeting on November 10th. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.